Hey, let's talk about games. Hello there, my fellow underhivers. We're back again today looking at the TTCombat Hive industrial set. I've put some together and I want to talk to you about the experiences of this product. Now it's together in front of us. Let's zoom for a little bit of a close-up here. It's looking pretty good. I'm pretty happy with it overall, but again, I want to go through this in a lot more detail with you. So, to start off with, getting this stuff assembled, getting it off of the sprue is pretty simple. There's a good way and a bad way of doing it. Do not just pull it off the sprues. Do not just decide, this bit comes out here, so I'll just sort of rip that out. No. What you want to be doing, especially for these smaller pieces, is find the connector where it actually attaches, place something the other side, just like so, and then push it through until you hear a click. Job done. It's now come through nice and safely, and you're not going to break anything. If you go charging through and just sort of ripping bits apart and yanking them out, you will get the occasional edge that will fray and you will get the occasional bit of MDF that comes off. Now, that's nothing on the quality of the MDF. That is just a little tip for assembly. Do put something the other side, click, pop it through, nice and safe. Some of these longer pieces here, you may run a little bit of risk if you go sort of yanking stuff around. So, other than that, I did have a little gripe that there wasn't any instructions, but they do come on the website, and it took me all of about 6 or 7 seconds to figure out where it all goes. Really, the only slightly complicated bit are putting these bits together here, which was really pretty easy once you've looked at the box. So, assembly-wise, it's pretty simple to put together, but I do think it needs to be glued. I've glued, thus far, most of these little bits together. The rest of this structure at the moment is just sort of sat together because I want to talk to you about a few features. And that's potentially one of the disadvantages for you guys, that this needs to be glued. Now, most MDF does need to be glued. There are a couple of kits that are a little bit easier to take apart and can be sort of, each level comes as a separate level. This structure really needs to be glued together. You could maybe keep these bits separate, so if you want to have a walkway here and you want to keep these bits as modular, no problem. Now, as for attaching magnets, there's no clear slots here for attaching magnets. It just sort of needs to clip on as such, although there's not really a very satisfying clip, although it will stay there. But again, if you want this to be truly modular and you want to be constantly swapping sort of where the walkways are on this thing, you're going to maybe sort of need to not glue it and put up with a very, very tiny bit of wobble through these, but they're not going to fall off on their own. Now, as for the rest of the structure, I've not glued these large beams on yet. Hence, there is a very, very small amount of wobble. Once these are actually attached, the wobble will be like yay. Not a lot, but given the design of these structures, these legs at the bottom here are long and thin bits of MDF, so there will always be a little bit of give. That is not necessarily a gripe against TTCombat, that is the nature of the structure. There are other buildings that have different sort of leg systems that will not have wobble. Also, bear in mind, I haven't put the feet on yet. That may minimise a little bit more, but generally speaking, even on a unglued product, if I put my hand on top, there's not a huge amount of give. If I'm just simply putting models on top, like yay, you're not going to have any issues. Even if I punch the table a little bit, there's not actually a lot of give here. It's going to be pretty structurally safe. If you're going to sit on it, it's probably going to break. Going to be honest here, I think any MDF, if you're going to sit on it, it's probably going to break. If you're going to bash it around in the car, it should be all right, but maybe this sort of building of MDF is not the easiest thing to transport. But let's move on. Now, let's talk a little bit about aesthetics now it's put together. So, overall, I really, really like the structure's looks, which is why I bought it. It looks like it does on the box. If we zoom in, these girders, the overall appearance, it looks nice and industrial. It's a nice sort of height. I'm going to be guessing around sort of 10 inches here, but aesthetically, it really looks like that sort of industrial sort of vibe. Love it. But only a couple of very tiny gripes. These bits here are very, well, I say very thin. They are fairly thin, and aesthetically, when you look at them from the right angle, well, you can see it just sort of doesn't really look like a supportive beam. It's only a minor gripe, but that's just the building design. The other buildings, I feel look a little bit better, but I wanted to do this one first because this is the one I could be the most critical of. And the other thing that I have a little tiny gripe with is side-on view from these. They look very plain. Now, here's why. You can't etch any detail into this without just encouraging it to snap at that point. So, Hydra here has a plan involving one of these, which is a belt punch, a leather belt punch, and I have a large sheet of PVC 1mm thick plastic that's coming in the post. I am going to be punching several hundred holes, and I'm going to be gluing these little things on here, over there, there, and I'm going to be making rivets all over the place. Why am I going to be doing that? Because when I come to paint it afterwards, and I'm going to be using a wash to do it after I've sprayed it and based it, it's going to give the paint something to stick to. On its own though, I mean, airbrushing it would still look fine. You could do an implied texture on it, which would be okay. But for me, I would like something to be able to paint on. That's my little fix. It's cost me like £4 for this, and it's going to cost me £3 for a PVC sheet that's going to make a few hundred rivets. So not really much expense. A little bit of modification for MDF stuff, I think, is sort of a standard if you want it to look amazing. But that's just my only other aesthetic gripe. So moving on, in terms of painting, well, all MDF is sort of subject to the same painting stuff. I don't think there's any MDF that comes pre-paid. There are some card sceneries that come pre-painted, sorry. So you need to base it with the right sort of base and primer, and then you go over, you would either spray it, you could wash it, you could airbrush it, you can do whatever you want. Generally though, like it. Let's now talk about playing with it. So let's say we've assembled it, we've painted it, let's talk about playing with it. So we've got a couple models here. Now, little tip for this, and one of the reasons I like it is it's got multiple stories. It's got multiple levels, and this thing costs about £12. That's one thing I haven't talked about thus far, is actually the cost. One of the first things I should have talked about is this whole goddamn structure costs like £12. It's not particularly expensive. Don't quote me on the exact number, but it's approximate. I bought it as part of a bundle which cost 37-ish. Might be wrong there as well, but it was definitely less than 40, and that came with about four different buildings. So value-wise, incredibly happy with it. Now, in terms of playing, the reason I got this is multiple levels and modular walkways. I wanted to have characters that had the ability to climb up a ladder, get in here and say, right, do I want to go up a level? Do I want to go across walkway 1 or walkway 2? For me, that says this is Necromunda, and that's why I thought this is perfect. And I love the fact it's sort of, is it a hexagon? It's a hexagon. So that means I've got lots and lots of choices as to where my walkways can go. So very, very happy with how it's going to play, but how it actually uses, I would recommend, if you're going to be putting models in and out, you take one out and you put it in there. Take one out here, you put it in there. The moment you start trying to put your hand inside, it's doable. Now, I have quite sort of girly wrists. I would typically wear, I don't know in centimetres or inches, but a smallish size glove. If you have big sausage hands and fingers, you're not getting your hand in there very easily. I've got a tiny bit of give. But what you can do is just use your fingers to pull out, put in, no problem at all. So I think it's actually very, very easy to use and manoeuvre models around without bashing it too much. Very, very easy to play with. So I think that's actually us starting to wrap up the overall product. Very, very happy with it overall. This is the first I've put together. I'm going to be doing a separate painting, spraying, modification guide, talking about applying the rivets, making it look a little bit more spectacular, talking about how I'm going to base it, make it look rusty, apply some textures to it, etc, etc, etc. That'll be coming at you next, probably over the next couple weeks, because it's going to take me a little while to figure out what I'm doing. But wanted to give you guys a real hands-on of this. Super happy with it, like the terrain, love it, cheap, easy to use, easy to put together. Just be mindful when you do put it together, you might get little tiny bits across here that do need a little bit of a file, a little bit of a go through just to sort of neaten it up. Any MDF terrain will need that. And in terms of glue, I've used PVA, on these bits, and it's as strong as anything. It's not coming off. So PVA, cheap, dirt cheap, easy to use, and I'd be very curious to hear if anyone has used magnets with this, if you've managed to get them to work anywhere. You could maybe attach some underneath here and on the... I'm not entirely sure how that would work. But guys, hope you've enjoyed the video. I hope you find it useful. Stay tuned for more updates. Going to have loads of terrain stuff coming soon. I've also got some dead zone terrain that I'm going to do a little hands-on with too, because it's so different to this. I want to do a little bit of a comparison as to the advantages and disadvantages. So guys, have yourself a great week. Good luck with the Christmas shopping, and I'll see you next time. Remember to like and subscribe. Take care.